Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to take a look at the life and legacy of one of history's most iconic figures, Mahatma Gandhi.
He was called Mahatma, the great soul, and even father of the nation. We think of him as a symbol of peace, right? But his methods, they were actually a pretty radical form of political warfare. And his influence, wow, it goes way beyond India, shaping justice movements all over the globe. So, the big question is, how did a shy lawyer manage to challenge an entire empire and help free a nation of millions, all without ever raising a single weapon? Let's dive in and find out how this man showed the world that the most powerful weapon isn't violence, but an unwavering commitment to truth.
All right, first up, from lawyer to Mahatma, his early years. Gandhi's journey didn't start on some grand world stage, not at all. It began really quietly, with him as a shy, kind of average student in coastal India. Honestly, there was very little sign of the incredible leader he was destined to become.
He was described as shy and even tongue-tied as a student, but what really shaped him was his mother. She had this unshakable piety and commitment to fasting. This part of his story is just fascinating. His mom, this deeply devout woman, would go on these incredibly difficult fasts and just not even flinch. Seeing that kind of intense self-discipline and moral conviction up close, it left a huge impression on him. It really planted the seeds for the very methods he'd later use to take on an entire empire. Okay, now we get to the part where everything changes. Section 2. Forged in South Africa. This was really the crucible of his activism. When he was just 23, he took what was supposed to be a one-year legal job in South Africa. Well, that one-year trip ended up lasting 21 years, and in that time, it completely forged that shy lawyer into a revolutionary.
Because in South Africa, this polite, British-trained lawyer came face-to-face with the brutal, ugly reality of racial discrimination. Look at this list. He was thrown off a train for being in a first-class carriage, kicked off a public footpath by a cop, beaten for refusing to give up his seat on a stagecoach, ordered to take off his turban in court. This wasn't just some minor inconvenience. It was a profound shock to everything he believed about justice and his place in the British Empire.
And that moment on the train platform, that was it. That was the turning point. As the quote says, he sat in that station shivering all night, thinking, should I go back to India or should I stay and protest for my rights? And he chose to protest. That single moment of humiliation, freezing in that dark station, was when he made a choice that would change not just his life, but the course of history. He decided not to run. He was going to fight.
So for the next 2 decades, South Africa basically became his laboratory. You can see it right here on this timeline. He starts by founding the Natal Indian Congress, then launches his first campaign of nonviolent resistance. He called it Satyagraha. He even sets up Tolstoy Farm, a whole community based on these ideas. He was organizing, experimenting, and developing the exact tools he would later use to challenge the British in India. He showed up as a lawyer. He left as a Mahatma, a great soul.
All right, Section 3, the power of Satyagraha, the method. So what exactly was this revolutionary method he cooked up? How do you fight an army with just an idea?
He called it Satyagraha, and that word itself is so powerful. It comes from Sanskrit, and it means truth force or soul force. Now, this wasn't about being passive or just accepting suffering. No way. It was an active, strategic resistance to injustice. It was all about using the force of your own moral conviction. Think of it as a modern political tool, but one that's rooted in the ancient Indian ideal of ahimsa, or nonviolence. And it was built on these 4 really powerful pillars. First, ahimsa, a total commitment to nonviolence, not just in your actions, but in your words and even your thoughts. Second, non-cooperation. You simply refuse to participate in an unjust system. Third, civil disobedience. You openly and peacefully break those unjust laws. And finally, and this is the toughest part for sure, the law of suffering. This meant willingly accepting the punishment, the hardship, to show your moral strength and hopefully awaken the conscience of your opponent. It took an absolutely incredible amount of discipline.
So, let's move on to Part 4, India's March to Freedom, the mission. Armed with this powerful new philosophy, Gandhi returns to India, and he starts applying Satyagraha on a massive, national scale, getting millions and millions of ordinary people involved in the fight for their own freedom.
And maybe the most famous example of this in action was the Salt March in 1930. Get this, he led his followers on a 241-mile walk to the sea,
Why? To protest a British law that made it illegal for Indians to collect or sell their own salt. So he just walked to the ocean to make his own salt in an act of pure defiance. Incredible.
And this quote from an American journalist, wow, it just perfectly captures Satyagraha in action. The marchers wouldn't even raise an arm to block the blows. They just went down. He heard the sickening whack of the clubs on unprotected skulls. It's brutal. But their refusal to fight back, which was reported by journalists all over the world, sent a shockwave across the globe. It completely exposed the moral bankruptcy of British rule.
Then, in 1942, came the final decisive push, the Quit India movement. He urged Indians to do or die for freedom, but through non-cooperation. This was a massive, nationwide campaign of civil disobedience that basically paralyzed the British administration. It made it crystal clear that their time was up. And just 5 years later, India was independent.
Okay, so Section 5, Gandhi's enduring legacy. Why does he still matter so much today? Well, tragically, just a few months after independence, Gandhi was assassinated. But here's the thing. While his life was over, his ideas were really just getting started. They were just beginning to change the world.
And this is the crucial point right here. His philosophy became a kind of universal blueprint for change. You've got all these incredible leaders, the children of Gandhi, you could call them. Martin Luther King Jr. literally called Gandhi's methods the guiding light. You've got Nelson Mandela, Cesar Chavez. All of them adapted his tactics of nonviolent resistance for their own fights for justice. The impact is just undeniable.
Even his own contemporaries, people like Albert Einstein, knew they were witnessing something completely unique. Einstein said, "Generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this walked the earth in flesh and blood." I mean, that says it all, right? People knew he had fundamentally changed the rules of the game.
And at its core, this is what it was all about. Gandhi's message was a direct challenge to the world's definition of strength. You can see the two paths to power here, brute force versus his soul force. He argued that real power isn't about physical domination, which is driven by hate and just wants to defeat an opponent. No, true power, soul force, is driven by love and morality. It doesn't want to defeat the opponent, it wants to transform them. It's about moral power, not physical power.
And this quote from Gandhi himself really gets to the heart of it all. The way to truth lies through ahimsa, nonviolence. For him, the means and the end were totally inseparable. You just couldn't use unjust, violent methods to achieve a just and peaceful society. The path you take determines where you end up.
Which leaves us with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? In a world that's still so full of conflict, can the quiet strength of soul force be our most powerful tool for change? His life really poses that question to every single one of us, because he proved that one person, armed with nothing but moral conviction, could take on an empire and inspire millions. It's an amazing reminder that sometimes the quietest voice is the one that ends up shaking the entire world.